Well, good morning and welcome to Booth Library and our continuation of our series on ancient Egypt. We are midway through our course and we have a delightful program this morning from our university archivist, Robert Hillman. And to continue looking at the various facets of life during and after the ancient Egyptians. So Dr. Wafik Wabi, of course, the coordinator.
Good morning, and thank you for coming to this session of the Futuristic Look through ancient lenses. And I like what you said a minute ago, that this is the nearest you can get to Egypt at this time. So I hope you enjoy your trip.
Thank you.
You want to know anything about Eastern Illinois University history? Here is a man. Well, I asked him about anything, any information that you want to know 100 years, more than 100 years ago, any pictures, any image. He has amazing memory and amazing resources. So Bob, thank you very much for accepting to present.
Well, first of all, I don't want to set myself up as being an expert on Egypt, because I'm definitely not. I'm learning, just like quite a few other people this month, about Egypt. And I've been there, which is more than some people have done. But otherwise, I'm not an expert at all. In the way that the term archives is defined today, and I'm not going to go into definitions, at least by the professionals, the ancient Egyptians left few archives behind as to the kind of things that we have today in archives. Most of the permanently valuable written records concerning the conduct of their affairs, for example, did not survive over time. Also, most of the written records pertaining to the functioning of the kings, the administrators, priests, nobles, merchants, all of that kind of thing, most of it did not survive. There's some examples of things that did survive, but for the most part, it didn't. However, what I will argue here is that because of the extraordinary measures taken by the ancient Egyptians to preserve for all eternity certain things, certain aspects of their culture, the things that they did leave behind survived for all these centuries because of the measures that were taken. And that these things constitute a rich archives indeed, in place of the kind of things we think of today as archives. The writings of the scribes, the wall carvings on the temples, the paintings in the tombs, the sculptures, both large and small, and other objects of physical culture, all these things together constitute the true archives of ancient Egypt. They provide deep insights into the cultural, historical, religious, and secular life of the people. It is all we have, but in some ways it's enough. I thought you might like to see this picture. It's a little bit grainy, but you can sort of get the idea. And some eager travelers here trying to learn about Egypt in 3 days. On this trip, on the left, yes. Well, yes, I will admit that. And that's my sister and my mother. 3 of us took this trip to Egypt.
When was that?
29, well, almost 30 years ago. Next March it'll be 30 years. So we had a lot of fun, learned a lot, but we're not there nearly long enough. It's hard to overestimate the importance of scribes in depicting and preserving for the future the culture of ancient Egypt. So I'd like to talk for a while about them. It's my view that the scribes were the true archivists of ancient Egypt. This slide shows a drawing of a scribe at work and a relief sculpture of apprentice scribes. Also shown are some of the tools of the trade, although those were ceremonial versions of them. And example of hieroglyphics, and then another example of a more cursive style of hieroglyphics. And the next slide shows a sculpture that the previous drawing was no doubt made from, because it's almost identical. The sculpture was 2700 to 2100 BC, really old, and looks very modern to me. This was carved from a stone called Greywalk, and the sculpture is of a seated scribe, and it dates from 1400 BC, not long before the time of King Tutankhamun. I've got several pictures here of sculptures of scribes. This one is made of granite. It dates from 2400 BC, during the Old Kingdom. It depicts an actual scribe, a person known as Dosher. This one carved out of a block of granite around 1300 BC, again about the time of King Tutankhamun. The sculpture also depicts an actual scribe known as Haramhab. And this was carved from a stone known as schist, and it dates from about 580 BC. This sculpture also portrays an actual person, a scribe named Nesbaquashti. I'm not getting these names right, I'm sure, but it's my version of the names. This one was carved out of wood in about 1300 BC, and this piece shows the royal scribe Amenemhotep on the left and his wife, whose name was Hathor. And around the base of it, a hymn to the god Amun-Re is inscribed at the pedestal. This is a relief carving from a tomb dating to about 1300 BC, and it also depicts an actual person. And he was a royal scribe named Nahu, the brother of King Tutankhamun's treasurer. He's shown wearing the elaborate court attire of the New Kingdom. This one is a relief carving from a mastaba, or tomb. It dates from about 2500 BC. And this piece shows 3 scribes at work painting hieroglyphics on papyrus scrolls. From these images, I think you can begin to appreciate the importance of scribes in ancient Egypt. Some even became prominent enough to have their images carved in expensive stones that had to be hauled hundreds of miles, and to be buried in elaborately decorated tombs of their own. So they were very, very prominent. Some of them were very rich and very influential and held other offices other than scribe. Less than 1% of the people in ancient Egypt were literate. And so these scribes were indeed among the privileged people in the country. Also, there was quite a hierarchy of scribes. And so they had apprentices and experienced scribes, master scribes, and royal scribes. And the latter categories of people, probably mostly supervised the work of others, but they came, with lots of experience to their positions. Scribes were quite often, a scribe was quite often the son of a scribe, and so from one generation to the next, they were all scribes, one after the other, over hundreds of years' time. This picture is from a museum display, obviously, and it's a collection of palettes and brush holders used by the scribes during the Old Kingdom. So these date from 2500 BC or so. Red and black were the predominant pigments used, although other colors were sometimes employed. And this one looks just like the other ones. And this dates from 1100 or about 1000 BC, about 1500 years newer than the previous example. So you can see that apparently the scribes and the ancient Egyptian technology didn't improve very fast. It continued the same century after century after century in some cases. This slide shows an apprentice scribe's practice board. It's wood, and they could whitewash it and practice their hieroglyphic characters. This dates from about 2000 BC. We saw this picture right at the beginning. This is the ceremonial brush holder from Tutankhamun's tomb. And the importance of royal scribes was recognized by the Egyptian kings to the extent that their place in the afterlife of the rulers was provided for. Some of the kings may not themselves have been literate, relying instead on their scribes and priests for preparing the way for them in the time to come and for perpetuating their stories for future generations. This, of course, is a shot of the famous Rosetta Stone, part of it, and along with an image of the man, a French linguist, Jean-Francois Champollion, who was given credit for finally deciphering the Rosetta Stone. It's inscribed in 3 different languages. The stone was discovered in 1799 by Napoleon's army in the village of El Rashid, a name that was Europeanized as Rosetta. Many ancient structures were later desecrated, and so this was one of the stones that had been part of another building at some point, and it was found centuries later in this small village. The Rosetta Stone provided scholars with the essential clues for interpreting hieroglyphic script, and thus helped bring the story of ancient Egypt to life. Here's the actual Rosetta Stone, and it's in the British Museum, as we learned earlier in one of the other presentations. It's made of granite, and it measures about 2 feet by 4 feet, roughly. It dates from the reign of Ptolemy V Epiphanes, about 196 BC. Originally part of an ancient temple, as I mentioned, the stone was inscribed with roughly the same message in hieroglyphics, Demotic, and Greek. Okay, now I'm going to talk for a while about papyrus and a few other things related to that, but before I do, I've got some examples of papyrus here to pass around. These are contemporary papyri, of course, but there's quite an industry in Egypt of selling this kind of things to the tourists. So I've got a few samples there for you to look at. Papyrus was very integral to the lives of the Egyptian people, and it figured largely in their artwork, their sculpture, their architecture, their cultural identity, and their commerce with other civilizations. And I read somewhere that they think they might have even at one time tried to figure out how to eat it. I don't think it was necessary because they had a rich granary supply in that country, but there's a thought that they tried to figure out how to cultivate it for food too. This wall painting, is from the tomb of Mena, of a hunting scene in a papyrus thicket, and it dates from about 1400 BC. This is one that was painted or done as a wall painting 1600 or 1500 BC, and it's from Amarna, and it depicts obviously ducks and a papyrus swamp, similar to the other one, less elaborate. Considered probably one of the most realistic depictions of Tutankhamun, this wood and stucco sculpture shows the head of the boy king, but what's interesting to my little discussion here is that it's perched on top of a papyrus stalk. They could have mounted it on anything, but they put it on top of a papyrus stalk. So that's another indication of how important they thought that plant was to them. This one is made principally of ivory. It's a perfume jar from the tomb of Tutankhamun, and it has papyrus-shaped handles on this side and lotus-shaped handles on the other side. We saw this object right at the beginning too. This is a papyrus, and ceremonial papyrus burnisher. And it was placed in the tomb along with other tools. They're sort of ceremonial, but they wanted to be sure that the scribes in the afterlife had their tools of their trade. And what this was used for when they made the papyrus, after the papyrus was woven together, and they would take burnishers and real finely mesh the reeds together, and I'm not an expert on the technology of it, but apparently the papyrus I'm showing is much cruder than the version that they would have had back when they used it as paper and marketed it all over the ancient world, really. In real life, the laborers used much more utilitarian burnishers to press together and smooth the surface of the woven papyrus reeds to create a suitable writing surface. For centuries, Egypt produced large quantities of papyrus, which was used for their own needs and as a major export product to trade for luxury goods and materials not available in their own country. This photo shows the elaborately decorated coffin of a woman named Nessie Khonshu, the chantress of Amun-Re, she was called. And this dates from the 9th century BC. And depicted on the interior of her coffin are scenes from the Book of the Dead, but also there's a papyrus motif, and it's used constantly in the tomb paintings and coffins, and it's just a very recurring symbol. Dating from about 1040 BC, this is one of the opening scenes of the Book of the Dead of Nani, a woman in her 70s, which is pretty rare to be 70 years old, reach that age in ancient Egypt. Books of the dead were also referred to sometimes as books of coming forth by day. The papyrus scroll on which the panel was painted was found in her tomb. On the left of the scene stands Osiris and the god of the underworld and rebirth. The deceased has placed an offering for Osiris on a small table, and stalks of papyrus separate the two images. This is one of the principal images of the scroll found in Nani's tomb. The entire scroll measures more than 17 feet long when unrolled. The scene depicted here shows the climax of the journey to the afterlife. Nani is in the Hall of Judgment, holding her mouth and eyes in her right hand. And behind her stands the goddess Isis. In this scene, Nani's heart is being weighed for its truthfulness. Operating the scale is the jackal-headed god Anubis, who's the overseer of mummification. In the end, according to the hieroglyphic inscription, which of course I can read, Anubis announces to Osiris that Nani has been found worthy of entering the afterlife, to which Osiris replies, "Give her her eyes and her mouth, since her heart is an accurate witness." This papyrus is from the Book of the Dead of a scribe named Ani, dating from about 1200 BC. The scene depicts Ani's funerary boat with the mummy stretched out on a bed, and below that the canopic vessels, jars, containing Ani's liver, lungs, stomach, and intestines. They were removed from the body and mummified along with the rest of the body, and they separated and put them in these canopic jars. The text below the scene recounts the journey that Ani is undertaking to the afterlife. Dating from about 1300 BC, this papyrus painting is from the Book of the Dead of Hathor. And that's the theme of my t-shirt, by the way, in case you get a chance to look at it later. In this scene, Anubis, the overseer of mummification, here, is introducing the deceased to the weighing of the heart. And here's still another version of that same scene. This is dates from about 1250 BC, and it shows how important this was sort of the climax scene of the Books of the Dead, because that's what determined whether the person was worthy or not. And probably there aren't any that weren't worthy, because they wouldn't have had the big thing made about them and buried in a big tomb and everything. So, Dating from about 1000 BC, this scene is from the Papyrus Scroll Book of the Dead, from the tomb of Hentawi, musician priestess of Amun-Re. This scene shows the naked figure of Hentawi and Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, who is represented as a baboon. Both figures are paying homage to the solar disk containing the sacred eye as it rises over the mountains. Dating from about 1500 BC, this papyrus panel shows Queen Hatshepsut, but she's dressed as the goddess Isis. and with the god Osiris. The inscription is written in a modified form of hieroglyphics, which was faster for the scribes to execute. And we saw this sample last night. This papyrus sheet shows an even more cursive script known as hieratics. It's thought to be the world's oldest, this particular one is thought to be the oldest surviving surgical document, written in about 1600 BC. The text describes anatomical observations and diagnoses and treatment of a variety of medical problems. In addition to hieroglyphics, scribes were often expected to be literate in hieratics, which was used in non-ritual, non-religious, more routine documents. Okay, I want to turn for a moment to a discussion of the ancient Egyptian temples. Very short. We've seen quite a bit of these before in the course of this symposium, so I won't dwell too much on it, but it's good to remember that many temples did not survive over time. They were cannibalized for their building materials. A lot of them were. And so some of the ones that are remaining are the newer ones in some cases. There's a few older ones that do, but of the many temple views that could be shown, I'll present only a few. Typically, the temples were covered in hieroglyphics from top to bottom. The walls, the pillars, the ceilings, and you've got a good example of it in the program, where everything that you can see in the picture basically was covered by hieroglyphics. These inscriptions serve to glorify the particular deity that was being honored by the temple, and also the pharaoh's embodiment of that god's qualities. The view shown here is the main approach to the Luxor temple, built during the reign of Ramses II, or Ramses the Great, in the mid-13th century BC. The temple is guarded by an obelisk dedicated to Ramses and two colossal statues of him, depicted as the god Osiris. This scene is from the courtyard of Ramses II, inside the Luxor temple. And this slide shows the colossal statue of Ramses II at the entrance to the processional colonnade at the Luxor temple. Note the hieroglyphics, as I mentioned, some of which has fallen off around the base and the throne. Built during the 15th century BC, this slide shows the main corridor through the Temple of Amun at Karnak, which is very close to Luxor. On the left is the obelisk dedicated to Queen Hatshepsut, and on the right is the obelisk of Thutmose I. This slide shows the rock-cut temples of Ramses II on the left and Queen Nefertari on the right. And these are at Abu Simbel, which is quite a ways south in Egypt, in the 13th century BC. And this is a close-up of one of the features in this temple here. This photo is of the colossal statue at the temple of Hathor, Nefertari's temple. What is clearly visible here, as at all of the temples, are the powerful messages sent by the sculptural works, as well as the splendid hieroglyphic inscriptions conveying important messages for future generations. It was the royal scribes who wrote these messages on the temples and supervised the artisans who carved them in stone. Thus, the scribes were, in a sense, archivists, as well as artists and craftsmen. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the tombs of ancient Egypt. We've seen this before in the course of our symposium. This is the famous step pyramid of the pharaoh Dosher at Saqqara, about the 27th century BC. It's the central figure of a vast mortuary complex surrounded by ceremonial structures. The first Egyptian pyramid ever to be built, this pyramid originally stood about 203 feet tall. It's eroded away to some extent, but it was clad in polished white limestone originally. This structure is considered to be the earliest monumental cut stone building in the world. Inscriptions inside the tomb name the king as Netjeriaket, or something like that. Dosher was the name that was used centuries later to refer to this pharaoh. In addition to being a grave for the ruler, the purpose of the pyramid was to facilitate a successful afterlife for the king so that he could be eternally reborn. Therefore, the scribes and artisans who decorated the interior took pains to document the king's life and to justify his worthiness for eternal afterlife. Interestingly, they even documented and preserved for all time the name of the pyramid's architect, a man named Imhotep, who, as I learned last night, was also a physician. So it's just incredible what kinds of things did survive, and even for 4,000 or 5,000 years. Just amazing. Within walking distance of the step pyramid of Saqqara is the pyramid of Unas, who reigned during the 5th dynasty in the 24th century BC. This photo shows the excavated causeway leading up to the pyramid, as well as the pyramid itself, which has deteriorated far more than the older one, the step pyramid. This photo, which was taken inside of the pyramid of Unas, has walls that are almost completely covered in hieroglyphics and relief carvings. Like the step pyramid, the inscriptions here were designed to perpetuate the life of the king and to ensure his safe entry into an eternal afterlife. Clearly, the scribes were busy even at this early period, and they were largely successful in their endeavor to immortalize their king. In modern times, when the burial chamber was finally entered, about 1881, very little remained of the contents. The grave robbers had long ago gotten there first. But the all-important inscriptions had survived as the archives. This photo shows the burial chamber in the tomb built for a man named Senefer in about 1450 BC at Thebes, which is not far from Cairo. Highly decorated with artwork as well as inscriptions and, of course, the Book of the Dead. This is the tomb of a powerful administrator, but he wasn't a pharaoh himself. He was a highly trusted aide to Amenhotep II. And Senefer held many offices simultaneously, including the mayor, or what we might call the mayor of the city of Thebes, the chancellor to the pharaoh, the overseer of the fields and granaries of Amun, the high priest of Amun. Through his many offices, he became rich, powerful, and highly respected, and his tomb surely provides ample evidence of his influential life. This is a view of the Valley of the Kings and Queens, which is located across the Nile from Luxor. And there's a lot of other views that could be taken from further away that maybe gives them more of an idea of what the mountains were like there, but this is one I chose. Dating from about 1300 BC, this scene is from the tomb of Ramses I. He was the founder of the 19th dynasty and the grandfather of the powerful Ramses II. This scene shows the pharaoh flanked by Horus, god of the sky, and Anubis, god of mummification. The tomb is located in the Valley of the Kings. Dating from the 12th century BC, this slide shows the elaborate hieroglyphic inscriptions covering the walls of the tomb of Ramses IV in the Valley of the Kings. This one shows wall paintings from the tomb of Ramses VI, dating from the 12th century BC. Inscriptions and paintings from the sarcophagus chamber. This wall depicts the Book of the Earth, including the reemergence of the sun from the earth. This photo is the modern-day entrance to the tomb of King Tutankhamun, who reigned for a brief time in the mid-14th century BC. At the time of my visit here, some 30 years ago, throngs of tourists were still allowed inside of the tomb. I think they have more restricted entrance now. And of course, this is the iconic mask of Tutankhamun, which covered the mummy, and this is sort of like one of the main symbols of Egypt, really. It's used throughout for all kinds of decorative motifs, and I've seen it in person 2 or 3 times in exhibits, and I saw it in the museum in Cairo. It's made of solid gold, inlaid with bands of lapis lazuli, carnelian, quartz, obsidian, turquoise, and colored glass. And in a way, even though it's an object, it's an archival piece because it tells so much about ancient Egypt, as do some of these other pieces I'll be showing you. This is a photo of the elaborate pendant found on the mummy of King Tutankhamun, displaying the so-called Eye of Horus, which was often used as a protective amulet. King Tutankhamun's ceremonial scepter, made of sheet gold beaten on a wooden core. This shaft is in the form of a papyrus flower and stem, and it's embellished at each end with a feather design in cloisonné work inlaid with carnelian, turquoise, lapis lazuli, feldspar, faience, and glass. The inscription reads in part, and I don't know how they could get all of this in that inscription, but the good God, the beloved, dazzling of face like Aten when it shines, the son of Amun, living forever. This is a decorative box in the shape of a cartouche with the name of the king, Tutankhamun. Hieroglyphic inscriptions in this form were usually reserved for the king, although occasionally the names of other people of high rank were depicted in cartouches. Of course, today, anybody can get a cartouche. It's a main tourist draw, and the companies send representatives to the tour bus, and the first day you're there and you decide whether you're going to order a cartouche, and if you do, a couple days later they come back with your finished cartouche of your name. This one's my mother's, actually. A cartouche is an oval ring that is a representation of a length of rope, I don't know whether you can tell that or not, that is tied at one end. When displaying the name of the king, it symbolized everything that the sun encircled and is thus an indication of the king's rule in the cosmos. We've seen this box before in the symposium. As Dr. Lanham mentioned earlier, it was a shoebox. So it's not very big, but it looks very well ornamented. It's from Tutankhamun's tomb, and depicting the king hunting lions on the top, and at the bottom doing battle against the Nubians, which was the people that lived south of Egypt. I'm going to show you a series of slides, and each one's going to be like what was inside of the one before. So this slide and its contents is an example to the extent to which the tomb builders, scribes, and artisans would go to provide for the king's afterlife. The photo shows the exterior of King Tutankhamun's Canopic shrine, guarded by 4 goddesses. Made of wood and gilded in gold, the shrine served to protect the mummified remains of the king's essential internal organs. Okay, inside that was this. It's an alabaster vessel holding 4 alabaster canopic jars containing King Tutankhamun's mummified lungs, liver, stomach, and intestines. And then inside of those jars, King Tutankhamun's internal organs were not placed directly into the alabaster jars, however, but within 4 small coffins of solid gold inlaid with colored glass and carnelian. These were miniature replicas of his middle coffin in his sarcophagus, showing the king as the god Osiris, wearing an artificial beard and holding the crook and flail. Now this slide shows the inside of one of King Tutankhamun's canopic caskets, inscribed in hieroglyphics. It was felt that the king would need his internal organs in his afterlife, so everything possible was done to preserve them and have them clearly identified in these hieroglyphic inscriptions in here as belonging to Tutankhamun. I hope that I've succeeded here in demonstrating that the scribes of ancient Egypt can be seen as the de facto archivists of their civilization. By recording the historic happenings, religious rituals, royal events, and activities of daily life in such a detailed and permanent way on temple walls, the walls of tombs, and on artifacts concealed in tombs, the ancient scribes preserved the essential elements of their culture and transmitted this wonderful heritage through the ages. Now, in case you are interested in going to Egypt, here's your ticket. This is actually the ticket that we used when we flew from Cairo to Luxor and back, Egypt Air. And this is a banknote that I brought back with me. You can see all the motifs that are used in it still today, and they really revere their past in Egypt, and you can tell that they do. Your camel is waiting. That's all I have.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate it. Any questions? Can you do this archivic or presentation more interesting, I wonder? Any questions or comments?
Hey, Bob. It's on. Hey, Bob. Were the scribes part of a priest caste, or were they kind of their own caste, or?
Well, I think it depended, because if they were attached to the, the king's inner circle, they would be. Most of them would have been part of that, but there were scribes in all walks of life, and there were merchants and administrators who were in charge of different parts of the country, the daily affairs of different industries and so forth, and they all had scribes. So I think the answer is that most of them were not, but then some were, and the ones that succeeded in preserving their work were, because the work of the other scribes didn't survive. Most of the papyrus deteriorated, and some things got flooded and destroyed that way, and it's So I think the answer is twofold.
Thank you.
Yes, please.
Most of the scribes was rowed up and down, is that right? Or they could be rowed across? Or?
Well, I think, I'm not an expert in this at all, but I think that it was mostly up and down, although I have seen, I have seen it the other way, so.
I think they did it both ways.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But question regarding the scribes that we have seen, they used pencil or reed or something?
They used, when they were writing on papyrus, they used it was sort of like a little reed that had a slanted end, and one account said that they would suck on it to make it sort of flexible, so that the pigment would adhere to it and be flexible enough that they could draw with it.
Like a felt pen.
Well, yeah, in a sense, yeah. It wasn't a brush like we know today with bristles and things like that
Obviously, they used very high quality or good quality ink.
They did, yeah, obviously.
It stayed.
It's amazing.
Don't want it to be on your shirt or something.
Yeah.
Back to the archiving process. Is there anything in your research that says they did it simultaneously as the events are going on, or it's kind of aftermath?
I don't really know that for sure, but because of the time it took to do it, I would think most of it would have been after the event, because it wasn't something they could just scribble out if they were doing hieroglyphics.
Any indication on the reeds, quote unquote, they used to cut in stone? I mean, the metal or chisels, or.
I don't really know for sure how they did that. I mean, we've had some talk about it in one of the other sessions I
It's amazing how accurate the
I
lines
know.
are. I mean,
yeah, and they survived all these centuries, so they must have used, they must have used some kind of a rope to make lines with, so that they could have straight lines. But I haven't read up much on the process of it.
Question personal: what is the fascination with this and the cartouche that you wrote the other day?
Well,
you have this.
I mean, this cartouche is. You can come up and take a closer look at it. This is my part of my mother's name. She bought it when we were over in Egypt, and I didn't buy one. I like gold jewelry, and I didn't want to spend 10 times as much, so I didn't get one. But and this, of course, I mean, I haven't had this more than 2 weeks, or the papyrus more than 2 weeks.
So it's not too ancient.
Yeah, no.
Well, any other questions or comments? I think we need to bring this to a close.